Hey folks, there are 4 books in the New Testament that we call the 4 prison epistles. And what that means simply is that they are letters, which is what the word epistle means, letters written by Paul from prison. So he was in prison when he wrote them. It's pretty simple. And as I've studied these prison epistles in the last couple weeks, I realized that Paul has a singular focus. One goal, no matter where he is or what he's doing. And his goal is that people would become disciples of Jesus. So any speech or any letter that we have from Paul represents this goal. He's really not living for much else. And because his goal is clear, he's very focused on meeting that goal at all times. You know, if Paul's goal was making money, being in prison would be a problem. If Paul's goal was being a political figure, being in prison would certainly prevent his success. And if Paul's goal was to have fun or enjoy parties, he would probably be very depressed as he sits alone in a cold cell or locked up in house arrest. But because Paul's goal was discipleship, it didn't matter if he was living in one place, traveling around the world, or locked in prison, he was intentional about living out that goal. So last time we talked about Paul being content in all situations, but more than being content, Paul was actively working in all situations toward his one goal, continuing to do the work in prison that he would have been doing if he was out of prison, because he was focused. So of course I knew this before, but I was thinking about how in some ways I feel like I'm trapped in a prison cell because of COVID, and we're not allowed to go out and we're not allowed to see people. So I was thinking about all the distractions that I spend my time focused on. I think about how sad I am that I'm not able to go to friends' weddings that are getting married and parties and people that I would enjoy seeing. I think about the spikeball tournaments that aren't happening this summer. And I find myself spending a lot of time thinking about conspiracy theories of what the government is really trying to do through all of this and what China might be interested in, what rich people might be trying to do. You know, it's easy for me to focus on these things each day. Jesus says, from the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And judging by my conversations, my heart is pretty focused on the sadness of missing parties and the theories of what Corona means for our world. Folks, that's really not where our hearts are supposed to be focused anytime, and especially not now. It's not wrong to talk about what's going on in the world, and it's not wrong for us to mourn the things that we are missing. They are sad. But is that the majority of what we're talking about? Is that the overflow of our heart? I'm drawn again to a familiar passage in Philippians. Philippians is one of the prison epistles. This is Paul talking from prison, reminding people in Philippians chapter 4 that we shouldn't worry about anything. We shouldn't worry about missed parties or government conspiracies or having enough money in the bank. We should be thankful. We should take these requests to God. And we should receive God's peace, God's eternal peace. And then, instead of meditating on worries, we should focus our minds on things that are true, things that are noble, just, pure, lovely, excellent, and praiseworthy. This is a choice that we have. If we allow Corona to be the song of our hearts, it will also be the topic of conversation, and it will be what we bear witness to. But if we choose to meditate on the cross, on discipleship, and on loving others, we will, by default, talk about discipleship, loving others, and we will, by default, provoke one another to love and good works. As we meditate on the heart of Jesus, we will learn to love others the way that He loves us and how He loves them. And like Paul, we won't mind if we're in prison or locked up at home for COVID. We won't mind if our friends disagree. We will be focused with our goal in mind, on mission, and we will spend our days in prayer and serving Christ no matter where we are. I was talking with a friend from Timberline just today and was reminded that defeating sin doesn't help us focus on Christ. Focusing on Christ meditating on what is true helps us defeat sin. And that applies to being on mission as well. What we choose to think about will change our hearts. And the change in our hearts will overflow into our words and our actions. Let us not be conformed to this world in all of its ways, its worries, its conspiracies, and its despair. Instead, let us be transformed by a renewed mind through thinking about what is true and noble and just and pure, that we might be a witness and a testimony to God's love to the world. Timberline, may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, the length, the width, the height, and the depth of Christ's love for you and for every person you meet, even the grumpy ones. And may your conversation and the testimony of your heart lead others to know Christ and to love him. God be with you always.